Here is an exercise progression to never get caught flat-footed again. Now this is a lateral jump and plyometric progression and regression that you can use within your training. I'm going to set up the whole spectrum so you can just pick and choose the exercises that you need to add to your training. So before we go into the actual exercises themselves, why the progression and regression? Why not just go in and do the most intense variation, the hardest variation possible from the very beginning? Well, the first thing is we need to prepare our body for the future intense work that is coming. If you haven't done much of this previously, or maybe you've done a lot of this but not exactly in this direction of movement, then you likely want to do less intense work to prepare your body for the more intense stuff later, so you reduce your risk of injury. Secondly, you don't want to tap into this very high intensity stimulus when you don't need to. The goal is to make progress and move the needle by doing the least amount of work possible. So that means if we can improve our ability to be faster, produce more power in this lateral direction, just by doing sub-maximal jumping, then that is what we're gonna do, and we're gonna save the more intense stuff for later. So why this lateral jump and plyometric combo? Well, within combat sports, we have a lot of lateral movement. It's not just forward and back like a track sprinter might encounter. Amateur boxing is probably the most dynamic in this regard, but MMA still has a lot of lateral movement with circling, etc. Also think of wrestlers as well with their circling. So most combat sports have a lot of lateral movement when standing. This is gonna help you stay light on your feet and become more explosive in different directions. So I'm gonna overlay some of the exercise videos here. The first one in our progression is the extensive double leg lateral jump. And we start with 2 legs because it is the easiest variation of the lateral jump or the skater jump. And the goal here is to have a smooth and rhythmic jump. Nothing should be hard or maximal, everything should be smooth and relaxed. The goal is to have a rhythm to what you're doing. So you're gonna do side to side with double leg jumps. The next progression on that is the skater jump, but again, done sub-maximally or extensively. So you have these 2 variations you can work at the very beginning to help you prepare. Now, I will say you don't have to do these on their own. There are a couple of different ways you can do your extensive jump and plyometric work. The way I like to do it is through extensive jump and plyometric circuits. You'll see those heavily used within the Sweet Science of Fighting underground training programs. Those are down in the description. Essentially, you're doing a circuit of 5 to 6 jumps and plyometrics all together. You get a bit of a work capacity effect on top of it, and you get a lot of different ground contacts done within a short period of time. However, you don't have to do it like that. You could just do multiple sets of these double or single leg extensive lateral or skater jumps. Typically, you're looking at anywhere from 10 to 20 total jumps in a set. You could go longer, but it becomes a little tougher. So 10 to 20 is where you're looking to sit. After a cycle or 2 of these more extensive style jumps, we can start going to more intensive variations, but we're still pulling some of that intensity back. And the first one is using a band to do that. So it's a band resisted skater jump. You're jumping as far as you can for distance, but because you have the band is going to lessen the impact you have when you land. So you're just going to do 1 jump out, walk back, and then do 1 jump out, walk back, etc. You can do anywhere from 3 to 5 reps, will tend to work well each leg in this regard. You could do 2 to 4 sets, and these typically done after a general warm-up, and then you might do this kind of power or jump or plyometric training after that general warm-up before you go into your main lifting. After a few weeks or something like this, we may move into skater jumps for distance. So now we're doing the same thing, but without the band, and we're going to return back in a continuous fashion. So we're jumping as far as we can, landing and sticking it, and jumping as far as we can, landing and sticking it. Now we've increased the landing forces because we don't have the band taking a lot of that body weight out of it. The next one we progress to is a quick response skater jump. So now we're reducing ground contact time and trying to get on and off the ground as quickly as possible while moving side to side. Now we don't want to make these jumps too small, but we also don't want to try go for distance like we did in the previous variation, because you're not going to get off the ground quick enough. So you got to find that happy medium between getting enough distance, but also being able to get on and off the ground quickly. Now again, you don't have to do these laterally side to side. You can do these in different directions. These can be multi-directional. You can go a little bit forward, a little bit back, and you can mix it up. But just as a general exercise theme, these are just gonna stay lateral in this instance. We get into our 6th variation now. Maybe we've done a few weeks of all of these and we wanna increase the intensity further, or maybe you're just layering on top depending on how many variations you're doing. But essentially we're doing a band resisted jump again, so jumping as far as we can, but hitting the ground and then returning as quickly as possible to the other foot. So essentially we're doing a skater jump out and back, but when we're coming back, we have that band tension pulling us. And that band tension pulling us is acting like an overspeed and we're having to put the brakes on when we hit the ground. So it's almost like an eccentric overspeed in this instance. And we're just trying to stick that landing. So nothing fancy on top of that, jumping out, coming back and sticking that landing with the overspeed. The next variation is when we put the overspeed into action. So now we're actually starting in the stretched band position and we're jumping into the band. So we're getting an overspeed into the jump and then we're trying to jump back as quickly as possible. The goal with this variation, this overspeed variation, is to hit the ground and try spend the least amount of time on the ground as possible and then try jump as far as possible. So we're trying to produce that force very quickly. And if you're able to handle that extra speed, you're getting the eccentric overload, and then you're ideally able to jump further back out. Obviously you have the band resistance there, so you're not gonna be able to jump as far, but the idea is that you're getting that eccentric overload on the way in through speed. And then finally we have the drop skater jump. So this is a method of shock training where essentially you're using your body falling as the overload in this instance. Now I'm only doing it off a small platform here, but typically you might do it off a higher box, 12-inch box, etc. Stepping out and then doing a lateral jump. This is the most intense variation out of all of them. You may not even need to get this far within your training. You may just stay within some of these band overspeed variations if you want to, if you don't feel comfortable going off something like a box to do a skater jump like this. But this should give you an idea of how a progression looks within an exercise, so you're not just throwing a random exercise into your training and then not knowing what to do before or after it being in the program. If you work your way through this continuum, then you have a clear plan to get you to the more intense training stimulus that can start to improve your speed and power. Now, just because you were doing maybe a drop skater jump or an overspeed skater doesn't mean that you can't do anything before it. Just because you've gone through the progression doesn't mean you can't do any of the regressions. An example would be maybe you're doing some of the extensive jumps as part of your general warm-up. And then when you're going into your main strength, speed, or power work, you might be doing some of the more intense variations. That's just an example of how both of them could be used together, so you're not just discarding something once you've moved past that regression. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like, comment below. In the description, there's the link to the MMA strength conditioning blueprint that is completely free. So make sure you pick that up as well, and I'll see you in the next video.